All right, awesome. Welcome everyone to the September edition of the My Million Year monthly speaker series. I'm your host, Bryant, and joining me again is my co-host, Ed. We're both life coaches, and our goal is to help our community members realize and achieve their dreams. Now, the job market continues to be pretty hot for ambitious talent looking for roles in corporate. So we're bringing in an expert to talk about career transitions. As our guest speaker this month, we'll be talking to Chase Mathew, who's currently product marketing manager at Oracle. Chase, I've known for a long time since our days at NYU. He is a masterclass in perseverance, professional networking, and finding the right role. So really excited to have him on to talk about his experiences. He's worked at 6 major companies over the last 10 years, so he knows how to make moves. And it's going to be a really interesting conversation. But before we get there, it's our financial tip of the month. So as Ed presents this segment, feel free to type questions into the chat. And afterwards, you'll be able to ask him questions as well. So I'll turn it over to Ed for our financial tip of the month. Ed?
Thanks, Bryant. So this month we are talking about HSAs, health savings accounts, and how to use them and why they're great. So let's jump in.
My God, so I took off 2 days yesterday and today.
So I think someone great. So HSAs are health savings accounts. They're used as a type of savings account specifically for medical expenses. So what's great about HSAs that you don't see with really any other type of savings account is that it has a triple tax benefit. Most of the retirement accounts that you hear about usually has maybe 1 or 2 of these. It's rare to have all 3. So a triple tax benefit means that any money that you put into the HSA is pre-tax. It also grows in the HSA account tax-free. You can invest the money just like a 401k. And when you take the money out for medical expenses, it comes out of your savings account tax-free. So this is a really powerful tool to use for your medical expenses. But something that people often don't know about HSAs is that it goes a little bit beyond that. So it can also be used as really a retirement vehicle. So one of the great things about HSAs is that the reimbursements on medical expenses can happen at any time. So if you have a tax or if you have a medical expense this year, you can claim it 10 years from now, as long as you hold on to your receipts and get the reimbursement 10 years from now. So in those 10 years, what you're really getting is tax-free growth in that account. So that's one way you can use it. The other little known fact about HSAs is that after you turn 65, it essentially turns into a pre-tax retirement account. So what happens is you can now make withdrawals after 65 on non-medical uses. The only difference is if you are taking money out for non-medical use, it's no longer tax-free. So you will have to pay taxes on it if you withdraw for non-medical reasons, which is essentially like a pre-tax retirement account. So that is a really great benefit. And it is helpful if you're kind of maxed out on your retirement savings options, even if maybe you don't need all of that money for medical expenses, you do have like this backup plan where after you turn 65, it's essentially a pre-tax retirement account. I'm going to pause there before we go into how this works in practice. Are there any questions?
Ed, really quick, you mentioned 10 years ago. Is that just an arbitrary number, or is there like a 10-year max look back?
Totally arbitrary. You can make those claims whenever, as long as you're saving those receipts. You can just let that money grow tax-free, and then make the reimbursement whenever you want, whenever you need to. Yeah. All right. So let's see how this works in action to see if it's the right thing for you. So this is what you might see. It's always complicated. We're actually coming up on, for many people, what open enrollment is for the following year. So you might see this when you enroll at your company on what type of savings plan you want. So HSAs are only available for high deductible plans. That's a federal requirement, meaning that it needs to have at least a $1,500 annual deductible before the plan allows you to have an HSA. So when you're comparing the two options, you might see something that looks kind of like this. So there's a lot of different rows here that you need to consider, and I actually cut out some as well to simplify this a little bit. But some of the things you might want to consider are, when you're comparing which plan is right for you, is the first one is how much is coming out of your paycheck every pay period. So usually the high deductible one is a bit lower than in network or out of network PPO plan. The annual deductible will be higher for the high deductible plan. The reason why you have the HSA is that you can kind of offset some of this deductible with the HSA money. So in this case, the high deductible plan is at $1,500 in this example and $350 in the PPO example. HSA not available in the PPO, and then the max contribution for an employee is $3,650. And one thing that employers often do for HSA plans is they'll also contribute money to the plan. So in this example, the employer is contributing $500. Out-of-pocket maximums will differ, and there'll also be differences in prescriptions, doctor's visits, and things like that. So you have to factor all those things in. So how this might look and why it might be beneficial for you is the first thing I mentioned is pre-tax retirement. So when you're putting this money into your HSA, you are essentially saving against your marginal tax rate. So in this example, someone who's making $100,000, they're contributing the max contribution amounts. And for this person, if depending on what state you live in, New York allows HSA deductions. New Jersey, California don't, but most other states do. So in this example, this person is saving about $1,100 by contributing the $3,650 into their HSA account. So this is a great start. If you combine this plus the $500 the employer is already giving you, this already is more than the annual deductible in this example, which is pretty good. So best case scenario, you have no medical needs for the year, and now you essentially have $3,650 in your HSA that can grow tax-free. And if you never end up needing to tap that money at 65, it's essentially a pre-tax retirement account. And then you also got an extra $500 free from your employer, so that's great too. And then in this example, you also save money on the difference between this $20 and this $10 in employee contributions. So that's a best case scenario. We don't really need any medical needs for the year. The worst case scenario in this example is really hitting this out-of-pocket maximum of $3,000. So this is $1,000 more than the PPO example. But a lot of this would essentially be offset by the tax savings, the employer contribution, and this difference here. So even in the worst case scenario, in this example, you would still end up with essentially $1,150 left in your HSA that can be saved for future use as well. So take a closer look the next time you have to make this decision, which is probably coming up pretty soon for you. If your employer is like most employers and they're doing annual enrollments, usually in October, November, to see if it's right for you. Any questions on HSAs?
Is the annual deductible, I see that's not attached to the out-of-pocket max. In what case would you end up, exceeding your annual deductible, but not out-of-pocket max? I'm a little confused by maybe so what the deductible means.
These are two different things where the annual deductible, a lot of plans, they will only contribute to your medical expenses after you exceed the annual deductible. And what the out-of-pocket max often is if you exceed the $3,000, then they'll typically pay for everything or almost everything. So that's the difference between the two. So before you hit the annual deductible, oftentimes the plans won't contribute at all. After you pass the annual deductible, they'll start helping. And then if you hit the out-of-pocket max, then they usually cover everything.
Hey, Ed, sorry I joined late. So I do have a question with HSA. I think there's under limited condition, people can actually use a limited um, saving account to use for medical, right? Is that like after the deductible amount or like, do you know how that typically works?
If it's for medical expenses, you can use it for the HSA. So even if it's for money that's going towards this deductible, you can reimburse yourself through the HSA.
Thanks. I
Yep.
was question about like, in addition to HSA, there's additional saving, so people can contribute, right? So it's called a limited medical use saving account, something. So people can typically use for dentist and also like a prescription for eyes. But they saying under the limited condition, actually people can use that money to pay for the medical expense after satisfy the HSA requirement. Um, I was like a little bit confused on that one. I try to read a little bit IRS instruction, but haven't got time yet.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that type of plan.
So I'll chime in here. So this is, I think, not as common, but there is a limited purpose flexible savings flexible spending account. So often with insurance plans, you have a choice on whether you can have an HSA or what's called an FSA, flexible savings account. The HSA, which Ed just went over, is only available as an option to you if you enroll in a high deductible plan. So meaning there's a high deductible, you have to spend up to the deductible, as Ed mentioned, right? You have to spend up to the $1,500 in this example before insurance kicks in. That's what a high deductible is. And that makes you eligible to also have an HSA account. Now, if you don't want the high deductible plan, let's say you want a more premium healthcare plan with a lower deductible, or just any healthcare plan with a lower deductible, let's say a deductible with only $500, meaning you want insurance to kick in. You don't want to have to spend a lot before insurance kicks in. That's a lower deductible plan, right? Those plans usually come with a FSA, the flexible spending account. They allow you to enroll in an FSA with those plans. The idea is that of an FSA is that you are only going to use the FSA funds for medical spending within that year. So, for example, if you opened a lower deductible plan and you also enrolled in an FSA, flexible spending account, and you put $1,000 in that flexible spending account, you have to use that $1,000 this year, this tax year. It does not roll over. If you don't spend it all, the rest goes.
It does roll over. I think it might be around 500.
500.
Yeah.
Is that?
But yes, 500 can roll over, but the rest does not.
The rest does not.
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. So that's the difference between HSA and FSA. Now, what you're talking about, the limited purpose FSA, limited purpose flex spending account, is somewhat of a hybrid. I haven't seen it offered at any of my previous employers, but
I have it.
You have it?
Yep.
You have it at yours, Chase?
Yep.
So you have a high deductible and an HSA, and you also have the limited purpose FSA as well?
Yep.
So it's basically an FSA that you're allowed to open if you also have an HSA.
But the caveat, like you mentioned, is you can only use it on dental and vision. And so the only reason I put money into it is because I got Invisalign. And so Invisalign, I just put in like the max amount and then I'm just getting all the tax benefits.
Oh, that's great. So quick question for that Invisalign. What's the first year typically cost? So I consider contributing next year.
Yeah, it depends. So with Invisalign, they charge you, it's actually the same as LASIK, which I also did. They charge you based on the amount of correction. So for me, because I had a very expensive correction, it came out to like, I want to say $6,000. And so I just maxed out my FSA for the payment of it. But then your insurance also covers it. So I had like, it's $6,000 or $7,000, something like that. And then insurance covered like 3,000 of it. And then I put another 2,000 or whatever the max amount is for the for the FSA. And so I just kept like deducting more and more of it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome. I love it. The community helping the community.
That's what it's for. That's what we're for. Awesome. Well, it was great to have some practical examples and of people with the LP FSA, the limited purpose FSA. Some good learnings all around. Any other questions?
I have a question about the LP FSA.
Mhm.
Does the restriction on the use of the funds for dental or vision services, does that get lifted once you're 65 or something, similar to the HSA? And I'm looking at you, Chase, because I feel like you would know the answer, but maybe not.
I'm gonna say I don't know, but the issue is also like compared to the HSA, like the money expires every year, so like you don't get as much of that benefit either way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
That's
with that clause in mind, I don't think so, because it is a type of FSA. It should, I believe, apply only for health. That's why they offer that. That's why the government's allowing for these types of accounts, is because they want to give people a tax break on things they need to spend on healthcare and medical, right? They don't want to punish people for spending on healthcare that they need.
And I'd say with the limited purpose, and this is more an assumption that I've had, I never actually looked this up. It only covers vision and dental, but those are the only two that aren't part of your main medical expenses. So like your vision and your dental can actually just turn out to be a lot more expensive because it's not part of like your deductible and all of that stuff. So I'm assuming, and I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming it's somewhat related to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fair point, because those typically might not sit in what's covered under your traditional healthcare plan. I think the key thing here is there can be a variety of these types of accounts out there. It's important to read the fine print read the disclosures and contracts related to your HSA or FSA accounts, and compare your insurance options to make sure you've got what's going to work best for you. All right. Anything else, Ed? Any final words?
Nope, that's it for me.
Okay, great. Awesome. That was a great discussion, gang. And thanks, Ed, for presenting on the HSA. So now we're going to move on to the community building segment. So for those of you who are new to the call, the community building segment is where we break off into smaller breakout groups to introduce ourselves and get to know each other, a little bit of networking. So when you do introduce yourself, give your name, location, maybe job, and then discuss today's community building question. So today's community building question is, what do you think are the coolest jobs in the world, the coolest jobs, and why? It doesn't have to be one that you actually want to do, but what jobs or careers do you think are the coolest? So we're going to go off into our breakout rooms. We'll take about 10 minutes and then we'll come back.
Awesome.
See you in a bit.
Guys, now.
Thanks, Ed. For any of us in a future career. All right, awesome. So we're going to move on to the main event today. So this is our guest speaker. As a reminder, folks, as we're going through, feel free to type questions into the chat for our speaker. We'll also leave some time at the end for you to ask Chase questions directly. But as a reintroduction, our speaker, Chase Mathew, is a product marketing manager at Oracle. And he's also part of the undergraduate career development team at NYU Stern, where he went for his undergrad. Chase has over 10 years of experience with both for-profit and nonprofit, B2B and B2C businesses. He's held roles at PwC, Verizon, Nielsen, LinkedIn, Freewheel, which is part of Comcast, and now Oracle, across marketing, data analytics, client management, consulting, and corporate strategy. That is a lot of ground to cover in 10 years, I have to say, Chase. Welcome to My Million Year. It's so great to have you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
So Chase, let's dig right into it, because there's, I think, a lot of your career to cover. Could you maybe just walk us through the last 10 years and six different roles you've had? just, kind of from start to finish, just a little bit of that journey you took.
Yeah. So actually, it starts even before. So I'm first generation American going into like undergrad business. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I feel like in college, Brian, you saw this. I was like, should I go into accounting? Should I go into consulting? Should I do finance? What about marketing? And so for me, my personality type is I just need to try everything. So I started with consulting. And actually, when I was in consulting, I was in the healthcare side of the business, right? Healthcare, customer experience work. And so I just jumped in there and said, let me just try a bunch of projects, see where it goes, and see what I love and don't love. And so on like doing more like these client projects, it was interesting. I learned a lot of cool things, but it really didn't feel right for me. And so I spent some time internally. And so a lot of the big consulting firms, they publish out reports and they have their internal think tanks. So I moved into that group. And I thought that was really interesting, like doing all this research, publishing stuff. And so I wanted to explore more of that side. But I'll be honest, after working in healthcare for about 2.5 years, it just wasn't the right field for me. And so my manager and I, like, we kind of hit the same conclusions. So he moved over to Verizon. And then lo and behold, 3 months later, I was at Verizon. So that was, oh yeah, it was totally by coincidence. It was really nice to then just try out something different. And so I said, you know what, I tried a bunch of different things out. Let me jump in the analytics route. And analytics was great. I loved it, diving into the numbers, really understanding the business. But for me, my personality, I was thinking like, do I want to really specialize into, building reports, pulling data, or do I want to switch more to the business side? And so for me, I was like, I don't know, where should I go? What should I do? And so I did the transfer into corporate strategy. I was like, you know what, let me try and figure out what the pricing, what the competitive intel side of the business is, where you have a little bit more exposure to senior leadership. And, but you still have some of the data side of it. And so I love that part. But then, after being there for a little bit, I was driving to New Jersey. It just wasn't the right fit. And so for my own personal sanity, really, I thought, let's look for a job in New York. And so I interviewed at a bunch of places and ended up going to a company called Nielsen Catalina. And that was where my first experience with the B2B SaaS side of the world was. And so that's where we were selling, ad targeting, ad measurement, and jumping straight into the ad tech side of the business. And I thought that part of that industry was really, really cool. I was much more on the client facing side, managing relationships with some of our largest accounts. And I was sitting there thinking, this is cool. I like this. I kind of want to try moving more and more into a little bit more of a salesy type org. And so after a couple of years there, I went over to LinkedIn, and they're a very sales heavy org. They have a process, they have a system, everything is it's a well-oiled machine there. And so when I moved much more into a real, when I moved to a company that's hardcore, they've been doing sales from the get-go, I realized that really wasn't my thing. And through that process, as being part of a big tech org, I was introduced to product and product marketing and the software development side of the business. And I was like, this is cool. This is where I want to be. And so I made the transition over to Freewheel because I had the ad tech experience and I was able to talk about the industry like an expert. And so they brought me in. I jumped in there and I was working for them on the product marketing side, and I loved it over there. It was absolutely fantastic. Product marketing is where I feel that's where my place was. And so what's interesting about product marketing is you're kind of the jack of all trades. So in these large tech organizations, your product managers run, and they're sort of the CEO of a specific product or function. And so the product marketer is kind of their right-hand man. Right? We run the research. Whenever we're testing things, we make sure that the operations are kind of set up. When we need to make customer presentations, we work on building the collateral. We liaise with the other marketing teams to make sure we have the press releases out, that we have customers on board for these sorts of different tests. And it was really cool to kind of take on and do a lot of things. COVID came, we had company layoffs. Unfortunately, I was impacted, but it was a great opportunity to take a step back and think, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And during that time off, I got involved in more nonprofit work. I got involved with NYU. I started helping them run fellowships and mentor students. And it was a really cool opportunity to take a break from work, which I feel like all of us, after working so many years, you need that break. And it was absolutely amazing, so much fun to take that break and say, what do I want to do with my life? What brings me joy? And so that's where I found that other side of my life that I dedicate a lot of my free time to, just so that I can give back to the community and so that I can share all the things that I've learned. And most recently, I moved over to Oracle, where I have a very similar job function, working on our ad tech products, on specifically like ad fraud, brand safety, all that sort of stuff. But the same sort of thing, right? How do we bring new products to market? How do we enhance our products? How do we tell better and stronger narratives? How do I bring information from the market to our product managers so that we can make the right changes and so we have the right product strategy moving forward? So that was a lot about my career. My big advice that I tell lots of students, since I talk to so many of them every single day, every couple of days. One, we're not in the old system where you have to be in a company for 40 years. If you're at a company for a year, 2 years, 3 years, and you feel like you want to make that switch, that's totally okay, as long as you have a story and explanation as to why. Especially when you're younger in your career, like one year jumps are not that big of a deal. As you progress, you may want to stick around for a little bit longer, but again, it boils down to the story that you're telling. And honestly, I've interviewed at so many companies. There are very few that really care if you've been at a company for like 5 years, 10 years at a time, or even like a couple of years. So really follow that passion. The other tip that I tell folks is, your career is really long, right? Your job you're in now may or may not be the right job for you, but think long-term. Think about where you want to be, find those skill gaps, and then figure out what sort of things you need to do. Your next career jump might not be the one that you want, but if it gets you closer to that end goal, that's really what you should be going for. You may be able to get to your end goal in your next jump. You may not, but you know what? You may jump to something that you may not think is the right move, and you might fall in love with it. Or you might realize your end goal wasn't the right place, and you might adjust. So those are like my main pieces. I'd also say for everyone, this is a framework that I always have. And Brian, I'm probably jumping into a bunch of your questions, but in my head, I'm like, I have to share my favorite things.
Please.
At any given point in your career, I always tell folks, like, I have a Venn diagram with 3 circles, right? What do I like to do? What am I good at? And what will someone pay me to do? That intersection of those 3 is your job, is where you should be. Because at the end of the day, you should like what you do, be good at it, and someone should be willing to pay you for it. And if that job isn't exactly where you want to be, that's fine. That's where that roadmap comes in, where you can say, look, this is where I am now. This is where I want to be. And this is the skills or the interim jobs or the extra education that I need to build up to get myself to that end goal. So I spit a lot of things at you guys. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know questions you have.
Yeah, absolutely. Chase, thanks for that walkthrough of your career and helping to connect the dots for us, on that journey. And so there is definitely a lot of themes that I take away from what you said, and a lot to unpack there. What you mentioned, just now about the Venn diagram framework that you tell students, that's very similar to the concept of the Ikigai, which is a Japanese philosophy that roughly means the reason for being, or people say the reason I get up in the morning. And it's something that we do at mymillionyear as well. At some of our workshops, we take students through, or we take participants through that process of determining, okay, what is my purpose? Like what's the right job fit for me? And we do Venn diagrams to find the overlaps between, exactly like you mentioned, like what am I passionate about? What am I good at? What can I get paid for? We have a couple other circles involved as well, but those are really the core ones. And I really like that's the same framework that you take to your life and career.
100%. It's I think the good thing is when I talk to a lot of students, like there's a lot of passion and drive and energy. And so being able to put it into a framework, consulting, the best part about consulting is it taught me to think in frameworks. And so putting it in that sort of way just makes so much sense for students. They're like, okay, perfect. This is how I should manage my career. And so I share that piece with everyone.
And that's also a nice segue, when you talk about the consulting experience, because, we talk to, a lot of ex-consultants, and actually, Ed and I are also both ex-consultants. You yourself are one. So, sometimes being in consulting, as you mentioned before, the idea of a jack of all trades kind of comes to mind. Sometimes you're in consulting, and because you jump from project to project, you have all these different disparate experiences, but they don't all come together that well at times. And, for someone like me, when I left consulting, initially I wasn't sure I wasn't sure what my next step was because I had a lot of disparate experiences, but maybe they didn't all revolve around like one central, competency that I could immediately say, I think I'm an expert in this, and I should therefore go into this career path. I did feel like a bit of a jack of all trades. That was interesting that that's how you characterized being a product marketing manager. Because it sounds like, in your career, you didn't plan on becoming a product marketing manager, when you graduated from NYU. You kind of found your way into that. Could you talk about the different experiences you had along the way that ultimately, like what learnings did you take away from each experience that led you to thinking, oh, product marketing manager is right for me?
Oh, 100%. Being in consulting, the first thing I realized is I like being in a chaotic environment because it's fun to make sense of the chaos, right? Like finding a framework, finding a way to, like when people are going crazy, when things are going nuts, to take a step back and say, let's break it down. How do I make sense of this? And how do I make this into something that's actionable? So that part of me was huge, like understanding that I love making organization when there is no organization.
Mm-hmm.
When it came to Verizon, like diving into the numbers, understanding what to do, how to do analysis, how to do research, that was really cool. But it was also interesting to see, like when I worked with hardcore data scientists, I realized I don't want to go down that path 100%. And then if you want to be sort of on the data side, but you don't want to get really into the data, you have a career path, but it's not as open as some of the other ways. And so for me, I sat there and thought, do I want to go the business side or the data side? And clearly the business side kind of won out. Then when I went on the business side, it was interesting to see, like, I could have gone 100% pure on like the sales side. And I wanted to try that. And I got to see it. I got to talk to different people. And as I went through that process, I realized I don't quite click there either. And so what I loved about product marketing is what you do is you're basically the in-between between sales and product and engineering. And so for me, I have the technical background that you need to be able to talk to the product managers and the developers, but I also have the sales background and the business background to understand what matters to the salespeople. I remember I was in an interview once and they asked me, you're talking about why you want to be a product marketer. Which job do you think is harder, the sales side or the business side, the sales side or the engineering side? And I sat there and said, you know what? I understand both. There's hard things on both sides. And I said, honestly, the sales side is the harder one because you have a quota over your head. And the guy was just surprised because it was a product-led organization. And then I explained my thoughts and he said, you're right. Like, it's a very different mentality, but the way that they thought, like, they couldn't get themselves in the frame of understanding the business side of things. And so for me, I looked in there and said, I understand both. I'm going to be the translation layer. And it's a very unique perspective that I came to the table with. And so that's where I found my little niche. And so I've, really embraced it and really love it. And what I recommend for all of you guys is to really think hard about, like, what is it that you love to do? What are you really good at? And what will someone pay you for? And then just really kind of, know that that's going to change over your career. Early on in my career, I thought that was going to be more on the data side. Then I thought it was going to be on the sales side. And then I realized it's somewhere in between.
Right. Chase, I think we might have lost you there. Let's see if we can get Chase back. We'll go on a brief hold there.
Oh no, did I freeze?
Oh, Chase, are you there? I think we're back. I think you're back, Chase.
Okay. Oh no, I froze.
all good. Glad to have you back, buddy. So Chase, so clearly, like you really went on a journey of self-discovery through all these experiences. But what I'd like to know, and I think a lot of people would like to know, is like, what was your strategy for job hunting and successfully landing new jobs? I mean, getting one new job is tough enough, but getting 5, 6 new jobs is really challenging. So what was your approach to finding a new job and then landing it, particularly in some of the areas where you were in new industries or kind of completely new to a role, you hadn't done it before? What was your approach to changing jobs?
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, at the end of the day, you want to have a passion for where you're going, right? So in the beginning, when you're like searching around, you may be a little bit confused, may not know where you're going, and that's fine. And that's where you're probably doing a little bit more exploration. But once you kind of figure out where you're good at, where you want to go, you want to let that passion come out of you, because when you're interviewing, like, people will see it, they'll feel it, they'll love it, and they're willing to give you a chance. The main thing, though, behind all of this is you just really have to be persistent and patient and really be organized. So with all of this, whenever I kept switching jobs, I would always have an Excel spreadsheet of all the people I reached out to, the last time I reached out to them, where I am in the process, to make sure I'm on top of it, right? So just making sure as you're reaching out to people, you stay on top of it. We need to be really, yep.
No, go ahead, Chase.
I was also going to say, you just need to be really persistent, especially if they're big job changes. If you're going into a new industry or new function, chances are you're probably not going to get that much response. So leverage your network, right? Go through LinkedIn, find people who went to the same university as you, from the same town, reach out to a bunch of folks and assume you'll get like 10% response back. And then as you just keep reaching out to folks, finding different ways to make yourself stand out, eventually you'll get a couple of people who will respond. And then as you just keep doing this and give it time, like, you'll get better at it, people will respond more, but just give it more and more time, then you'll have the conversations. Eventually someone will give you a shot, and that's all you need.
That's great. So in this case, what you're saying is, reaching out to your network and talking to people that you already have an existing relationship with tends to give you the best results in terms of switching careers and changing jobs.
100%. So this is it. Like, if you can reach out to people cold, but you get much more response if you go through someone who's a first or second degree connection. So my tips for folks is, let's say you see someone that I'm connected to or Bryant is connected to, you should reach out to one of us and say, hey, I see this person at X company doing this sort of job, or this person in this function. I think it's really interesting and I'm really interested. Would you mind doing an introduction, right? That way, the chances that they'll respond are much higher. If you don't know the person well enough, or you have no connection, go ahead and still do the outreach and find some kind of way that you can connect with them. If you went to the same university or from the same hometown, if you have some kind of sports affiliation, right? If I know that, for example, Michigan folks, like, they are really big on sports. If you find someone who went to Michigan that you may not have any connections with, start your title by saying "Go Blue," and then say, "Would love to have a conversation." Something really simple like that. People take college sports, especially if you see someone who went to a school that's big on sports, really, really seriously. And so you can always use that as a way to, like, break the ice and see if they'll give you a chance. You'd be surprised at how many people actually respond to you. And it's funny because a lot of people are like, wow, Chase, you're really bold. You're reaching out to all these different people or asking if someone will give you a connection. And don't ever feel shy about that. If you have an old classmate, if you have someone that you sort of know, what's the worst that could happen? They don't respond or they say no. And so, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because you'll be surprised at how much people are willing to do to help you out.
Fantastic. That's great advice. I think at the root of it, it's making that human connection. And that's something I know that you're an expert at, Chase.
Oh, well, let me tell you, I have a story about this. My job at Oracle, the one that I got, actually, funny enough, I saw on LinkedIn a person who I had a mutual connection with, but I didn't really know the person very well. She made a post that said, I'm really happy during COVID, I lost my job and I found this really great opportunity. And she had this nice long post thanking all these different people. So I just sent her a message, right? Like, I didn't have any way of connecting with her. And I said, hey, Cassie, my name's Chase. I just saw your post. It was really uplifting. Like, I just love reading this. Would love to stay in contact and get your tips on how you managed, interviewing during COVID. We stayed in contact. And then when I saw this opportunity at Oracle, I said, hey, I know you realized you have a few mutual connections. Can you introduce me? And then she said, hey, actually, I know the hiring manager. Let me put you in contact with them directly. And it was this crazy chance of, like, I just sent a message randomly, and they were willing to go above and beyond to help me out.
There's a lot of good people in this world. And, you just have to take a chance and try to find them. That's incredible, Chase.
Oh yeah.
That's great.
And just remember, like, think about the downside. Like, there's no real downside for it, right? As long as you're not, like, spamming a million people, like, go there, be genuine, be you, and you'll, like, people will eventually want to help you. Like, you'll have a bunch of folks that don't respond, but you'll also have a bunch of people that will respond.
Right. So I want to make sure, I could go on forever, but I want to make sure I hit some of the questions that are coming in from the audience. So first, we have a question from John, and he says, which of your jobs was your favorite?
I'm gonna go with honestly product marketer at Oracle so far. Honestly, because and the only reason I say that not because
they're gonna watch this video.
right, it's not because of that. It's because with all my job switches, I was always kind of like hustling and doing kind of a bit of a rush because I was sitting there thinking this isn't where I want to go. I want to try something different. With this job, I genuinely took off a couple of months. I took a step back and said, is product marketing where I want to go? Is ad tech where I want to stay in? Like, what sort of culture, what sort of people do I want to work with? And so I genuinely joined this team because I really bonded with the team I worked with. And so the hiring manager, the other folks on my team, they ended up leaving soon after I started, but we were super tight. Like, I love those guys. Like, I joined because of them. And the new team is great. I love them all to death. And the people really drove me in. So for me, I judge more than anything, how much do I like the people I'm working with? Like the old interview question of, or the interview tip, like, can you sit on a plane with them for 14 hours? Like, that holds true to me. Like, can I hang out with these people and have a couple beers and have a really great time with them? If the answer is no, I generally don't like it. And it's funny, when I was interviewing, I turned down job offers for other companies where, you know, they were offering like fantastic offers, but I just didn't click with the people. And I said, you know what? That's not where I want to go. Like, I want to like the people I work with.
Definitely agree with that. Another question from the chat, Mona says, it seems that a product marketer has a lot of similarities with a UX designer. Thoughts? What would be the difference?
Yeah, so UX designers, they're focused on collecting a lot of the user research specifically for the design and informing and working with product to kind of create new layouts, new UIs, all of that sort of stuff. We also do research, but in a little bit of a different way. We're more on how do you actually sell this sort of stuff. So the UX designer will work with the product manager, and or they might even have a UX product manager depending on the organization, and they'll go ahead and build out an actual product. Once that product is built, like, we'll work on selling it. So one of the good ways that I explain product management, UI, and product marketing to folks is product managers, their focus is on getting products on the shelf. UI, it's part of the same, right? You need to make sure you have a product that has a clean and simple UI that customers can use. And then our job is, once you have the product built, how do you get it off the shelf, right? Those guys are focused on making it so that's on the shelf. My job is, how do you get it off? How do you price it? Who do you sell it to? All of those sorts of things. So there's a lot of the similar skill sets, but there's also a lot of differing skill sets as well. I would say ours is more focused on like the sales, marketing.
The sales side, right.
Exactly, commercialization bit.
Makes sense. Follow-up question to that. Do you find product marketing managers are typically full-time employees, or have you seen product marketers as like contractors as well?
I've seen both. And so that's also another good way to get into a lot of companies. So a number of large orgs have actually reached out as contract positions back when I was interviewing. And so I generally suggest not going down that route if you have no other option. But if you're trying to break in, you don't have the experience, and you're willing to take a little bit of a risk because you generally have to, get your own insurance and all of that sort of stuff. If you're willing to do that, can't hurt to give it a shot, especially if you like the team, company, and people. But in this sort of job market, you may not need to go down that route because there's a lot of open headcount at a lot of companies. Got
it. Another question. Questions from the chat are just flying in, so I'm just going to try to hit them one at a time as they come in. So another question from Gloria. What are your thoughts on taking time off or making additional time and investment to reskill yourself or take a step back and think, versus networking and trying to make things work while you're currently at your current job? So I think it's take time off versus try to change jobs while you're currently employed.
Yeah, that's definitely like a very personal thing. I think if you can manage to do all this while you're employed, why not, right? You get another paycheck. But if you've been at a company for a long time, or you're not unhappy, you have a good savings, you just want to take a break, that's also acceptable. Like, what's beautiful is, as long as you have a nice explanation for it when you interview around, people are receptive to these things. I've seen so many folks and interviewed so many folks that have like on their resume, like 6 months, like exploring the world, 3 months, like time off as like a mom, like all these sorts of things are like on there. I would say at the end of the day, like, if you can, there's always the benefit of doing this while you have your job, but there's also there's a lot of benefit in taking time off, clearing yourself from like the corporate world and thinking more about what you want to do. So unfortunately, I'd say it's definitely very personal, but there's merits on both sides.
I see. Now, related question, how do you manage a job if you don't have prior work experience in that field? Like you're really making a career change, and you've only, learned some things, from what you read, from books, maybe from talking to other people. How does that work?
Yeah, the interesting thing I've learned after switching jobs so often and working at so many different companies, like you jump in and you think everyone's an expert at their field. Most people are figuring it out the same way you are. A lot of these roles too, like may not necessarily have existed or been as big in the past. And so you're in the same boat as everyone else. My tip is just be really open and open to feedback. Find the folks that can be your mentors, people that are good at their job, learn and work really, really hard. And if you ramp up, if you show that you're putting in effort and you read online, understand the industry, talk to the experts and figure out, how to get things done, you'll do well no matter what. At the end of the day, too, like expectations for your first like 3-6 months are not that high. So you have the opportunity to take it on your own, to be really proactive, to learn how to be an all-star.
Got it. That's great advice. Another question about, shifting jobs a lot. How do you feel that impacts the speed of quote unquote climbing the corporate ladder? Because if you're changing jobs often, then sometimes you're making lateral moves, or maybe if it's a new career path, you take a little bit of a step back. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's how you manage your career and how you go through the interview process. I feel like every time I switch jobs, I ended up getting a bit of a promotion in title. So you can manage it that way. Even if you take a step back, so be it, right? Take a little bit of a step back. You have all this relevant experience from your previous jobs. Move in and push to get promoted like super early, right? Let's say you take you take a slight title drop, but you know how to do your job. You do so much better than all of your peers. Bam, you have an opportunity to get promoted even sooner.
Right. You can still accelerate, right?
Exactly. And then also remember, like, there's a difference between your title and your pay. So if you jump in, if you do a switch and they might, lower your title, but they give you the same pay, it doesn't really matter all that much. So that's something also that depends on your own values, right? So that's something to consider as well.
Absolutely. How much due diligence did you end up doing for the companies that you ended up moving to? Like, how much information did you feel like you need to know to get comfortable in making a move?
It's funny. So for me, I learned through the interviews. And so every single one of my job switches happened, or the ideas of where I wanted to go happened pretty much through the interviews. So like, I didn't even know, for example, what a product marketing manager was until a Spotify recruiter reached out and said, hey, we think you'd be a fit for this role. And so then I did some Google research and I was like, this is really cool. Let me interview. And then I realized this is something interesting, but I definitely botched the interview. So then I tried interviewing at a few other places and kind of figured it out kind of as I go. So I would say due diligence wise, quite a bit. I'm fairly social and I like to talk to folks and see what other career paths there are. But then as the interview process goes along, I'd even say like you learn so much by just talking to people through there as well. So, I always recommend do as much research as you can, talk to as many people as you can, read online about different career paths, because you'll never know. You might find out that there's a career path that you never even knew existed. That's the perfect place for you.
Exactly. I think that's a really, really good and open-minded approach is, view the interviews as partially your research, right? Just as much as the company is trying to see if you're a good fit for them, you're also trying to see if that company and that role is a good fit for you. So it goes both ways. And so I definitely agree with that approach.
100%.
So I think, final question that we'll go with tonight. If you could do it all again, would you have taken Fatty Without Borders to the next level and go international and allow it to be your number one source of income? So I think we need to take a step back here and explain what Fatty Without Borders is.
So Fatty Without Borders was my Instagram handle when I was super into travel and food. And so I would post lots of food pictures. And this was in the earlier days of Instagram where I had a couple thousand followers. It was a lot of fun. And so I started going to like little events and everything. It was a great way to experience new places, check out new menu items, and get free food, to be honest. What happened over the years though, it was really fun to go through, but it was a lot of work. And so I kind of lost the joy in it. Like when you spend all of your free time liking and commenting on other people's posts, like being really in that world and spending your free time going to events every night, like it just doesn't, it's just not as fun. So as much as it was cool to get the notoriety and have, random times where different people recognize me on the street, which is kind of strange and weird, but fun and cool, it wasn't worth the time and effort, and it took away from something that I truly loved. So unfortunately, I'd say no, I probably won't do it. I still do the food pictures, I still do the travel, I still do the research to find all the best places and eat all the things. And I highly recommend that you guys do all that stuff. But for me, like the second you turn a hobby into a job, it loses the fun bit of it. So it's going to stay a hobby.
Okay. Yeah, that's good advice, Chase. At its core, you have to keep the passion alive in your life, whether that's things that you relegate to being hobbies that you do to take your mind off of things, and other passions that do become your career and bring you joy in the accomplishments and the achievements you have in business. So, Chase, I think we had so much to talk about. We'll have to definitely bring you on again, and check back in on if you're still at Oracle, or if you by the time we talk to you again, you've made another jump and you're at some other company, and we'll be able to hear all about that. But thank you so much for joining us tonight, answering our questions. It's been really fantastic, hearing from you, your prolific career, many successful career transitions, and we wish you much continued success.
Thank you. And if you guys need any help with any sort of career, life sort of choices or anything, definitely feel free to reach out. If there's anyone in my network that could help you guys in your transition, same thing here, reach out. So many people have helped me out through the years. And so I'm all a fan of giving back, and this is the least I can do.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Chase. And thank you everyone in the audience who joined us tonight. It was a pleasure seeing and talking to all of you. Stay tuned and hope to see you again next month.
See you later, guys.
Good night,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night.
Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, Brian. Bye, Ed.
Thank you, Mona. Take care. Have a great night.